Welcome to A Perfect Touch. I'm Jeanette. It's time to share with you the third and final part of this series for #HistoricalDisneyCostume. The worldwide collaboration has extraordinary costumes from extraordinary creators, and I will link a playlist for you to view to your heart's content. First in my series was The Plan. Next in the series was Part 2, The Dress a Corselet. And now, here is the last in the series, Part 3, The Coat, the Turban, the Finale. All links will be shared in the description. I'm so excited to share the final details with you, and honestly, I'm a bit sad at the same time. I was inspired to create an historical Maleficent and Edwardian attire with this Disney image and put the first ideas on paper on April 12th. As I'm taping this, it is August 12th, and this project has been dominating the sewing room for all those 4 months. Historical costuming takes time, and it is bittersweet when the project is finally and thoroughly complete. I truly love creating and sharing these costumes with you, and hope you enjoy being with me on this journey. It was those glorious sleeves that reminded me of a pattern I've used before, Folkwear 503 Poiré Cocoon Coat. I created a sparkling velvet coat, wore it on the red carpet at Costume College, and enjoyed being a newly liberated lady with my rose design meerschaum pipe. I'll share a link to the blog post for the creation of that coat, and it also has some wonderful detail about Paul Poiret. I've recently read the V&A publication of Paul Poiret's autobiography, King of Fashion, and I highly recommend it for insight into the gentleman himself, his innermost feelings about his life and creations. This is the cover of the book and a list of other titles in the V&A Fashion Perspective series. I will use the same fabrics used in the smaller details of the dress a corselet, the black geometric burnout velvet, and the dusty lilac crepe back satin. To trim the outer edges of the collar/neckband, I'll use a beautiful iridescent coke feather trim found on Etsy. The coat pattern piece is huge, and I roll up the area rug, layer both the velvet and satin, and cut them at the same time. I turn the pattern piece over and repeat for the opposite side. The two neckband pieces are cut from the burnout velvet, but in my effort to mirror the pattern, I made a mistake, and I had to cut one side twice. But it was worthwhile, so I could sleep at night. The main coat and lining seams are quick and easy. First, along the center back to bring the two halves together, then along the inner sleeve through the mid-chest. The same seams are sewn for the outer fabric. I love how the velvet drapes. Both layers are left to hang on the dress form for several days to allow for any fabric stretch before final sewing. Meanwhile, it's time to sew and trim the neckband/collar. There is a single seam at the center back. Some black velvet piping left over from a previous project is stitched to the outer edge. Now is the time to add the luscious feather trim. But heavens, I had no idea how difficult that was going to be. The feather ends are encased in a ribbon, and to hold them in place is an adhesive. I place the velvet piping over the feather edge, enough to cover the ribbon, and then I have to sew by hand through the 2 layers of velvet piping, the layer of burnout velvet fabric, and the feather trim ribbon with adhesive. It is tedious. The adhesive cakes my needles and pins, and my hands take quite a beating. But in the end, it was just so worthwhile, and I would do it all again. just not very soon. The neckband/collar is machine sewn to the outer edge of the coat body and hand sewn to the coat body just at the inner edge of the velvet piping. Again, adhesive and yucky pins and needles, but oh my, I love it. The feathers are a nod to Maleficent and the story behind losing her wings to Stefan, which gave him the right to become King Stefan. I have this t-shirt, and I also had in my stash an applique of beaded wings. It's been in my stash forever. I have no idea why, but it seems a perfect touch for this coat. I position the wings the way I see Maleficent's wings in the movie, and I hand-stitch them to the burnout velvet. There is just a bit of velvet piping left over, and I add it to the sleeve edges. With all the embellishment on the outer layer, it is time to place the layers right sides together, pin, leaving a gap on the lower edge for turning after sewing, and sew with care to prevent any damage to the feathers. The coat is turned right side out, the opening stitched closed. The lower edges of the feathers on the neckband/collar are hand-stitched to fit, and the sleeve lining is sewn to the outer layer at the piping. There are instructions in the pattern for closures, but I decide to leave the coat open to show that beautiful dusty lilac lining. And the Poiré Cocoon Coat is finished. Now it's time to create the last piece, a Poiré-inspired turban. I'm using a pattern by Lynn McMasters out of a portrait for early 20th century turbans, view A, in the lower left corner. The pattern offers options for the crown, the front shape, the tie in the front or back, a soft crown, and has instructions for creating the embellishments. To create a crown that fits my head with my hair pulled into the crown, I need to pad out a styrofoam head to my own head diameter using polyester batting. Then the padded form is covered with plastic wrap to keep it dry. Now I will need 2 layers of buckram, a spray bottle of water, and rubber bands that will stretch around the head at the point where I want the crown to end. A single layer of buckram is wet and draped over the styrofoam head. Since I'm creating a turban and not a smooth crown hat, I do not smooth all the buckram, but only make sure that the front is smooth. Another layer of buckram is sprayed with water and draped over the first layer at a 45-degree angle. The rubber band is placed exactly where I want the crown edge to fit on me all the way around. I can always cut away, but I can't add, so I fit the rubber band slightly lower than I might want. Once the buckram is dry, I can remove the rubber band and the crown slips easily off the form. The excess buckram is cut from the crown, and with another water spray and smoothing, I will reuse the scrap for the backs of ribbon flowers and other embellishments. Using the same fabrics I used for the dress and coat, I line the outer crown burnout velvet with the dusty lilac satin, and I cut black satin for the lining. Some more poly batting will create the front roll on the crown. The triangle scarf should have been cut on a bias fold as one piece, but there wasn't enough fabric, so I cut 2 pieces from the burnout velvet and the lilac satin, and I sewed them into a single triangle. The center front and center back of the crown are marked. The 2-layer outer crown fabric is clipped to the smooth crown at the front and pleated as necessary around the sides and the back. The seam allowance is folded under for the lining and clipped to the edge of the crown, smoothing and pleating similar to the outer layers. The clips are replaced with pins to avoid creating dents in the velvet, and the lower edges of both outer and inner fabrics are whip-stitched slightly inside the crown edge. The covered crown is complete. The poly batting piece is rolled according to the pattern instructions and placed at the front of the crown and stitched in place on each side. This is slightly different than the instructions, but experimentation gave me the result I wanted to highlight the center ornament, which matched the necklace and earrings. The triangle is placed around the poly batting roll and tied in the back of the crown. The lilac satin back of the triangle just peeks out when tied and is exactly what I was hoping for when I chose the color over a plain black. Some feathers from the coat trim are added at the silver filigree ornament, and that completes the turban.
The story is not quite as you were told. Well, well, what a glittering assemblage, King Stephen.